Cottage housing regulation. This is Jack Show. Next presentation is related to cottage housing, and give you a little bit of background why this is coming forward to the council, some examples of cottage housing and policy issues. You have most of the slides been in your packet. A little bit of background. The idea of cottage housing was kind of brought forward by a developer that's looking to construct some cottage housing in an existing subdivision within the city. That was the Megan's Meadows subdivision, I think it is. And their idea was to provide the cottage housing for veterans. And the developer that owns the property is Habitat for Humanity. And they had a question of whether that's something that whether we could do that underneath the current codes. Based on our current codes, we don't have a provision that could allow the cottage housing on that particular site. In our plan unit development section of the code, there are provisions that allow modifications to the code, but it didn't apply to that piece of property based on the size of the property. So we don't have any provisions applied to allow for cottage housing. And what we're looking at as part of this, after we get done with the presentation, is some policy direction and whether the council would like staff to consider and put together some draft regulations dealing with cottage housing. And what I mean by cottage housing, we have a few slides that we can show what it's like. And I have 4 different examples. One's from Silverdale, one's from Shoreline, another one from Bainbridge Island, another one's from Langley. And what you have is the first example. This is what they call it. They call it Chico Beach cottages over by Silverdale. There's 7 units. It's in the middle of a residential neighborhood. The property to the top of the stream, which is north, that's a $1 million house that's up there. This is a little bit more than an acre with 7 units, which translates to about roughly 6.8 units an acre. And I might add that all the parking on this, unfortunately, this cursor doesn't work, for this development is over by the road, on the left side of the screen of the development. This is an example of what it looks like. As you can see, there have a lot of different design and architectural features and common areas for the people that live within this development. The second example, this is a well-known one. Some of you may already know about it. This is one of the first cottage housing developments kind of in the area. It's called Greenwood Avenue Cottages. This is up in now what is called Shoreline. There's 10 units on a 34,000 square foot lot, which translates into about 12.5 units an acre. As you see, all the parking for this development is on the right side of the property, and they park there and people walk in, and you can see where the entrance comes in. This shows what this development looks like. Again, this has a lot of nice architectural design features and common areas for the people who live within the development, where they can congregate, have parties, have barbecues, and so forth. Talking with some of the folks within this development, a lot of them are elderly people who downsize, or single people who want to have a house, but they don't want all the maintenance issues with a big yard, so that they buy into this. The third example is the Erickson Avenue Cottages, and I think Lance is familiar with this one. This is on Bainbridge Island, and again, you can see to the right side of development is where most of their parking is located. And again, they have the common green space, they have the architectural standards, and again, you can see the area where people can congregate and talk with their neighbors. And within this cottage housing type development, it also, you could call it's very septet oriented, or crime prevention through environmental design, because you have different neighbors always having eyes on and watching other neighbors' homes and determining if somebody's there is supposed to be there. The last example is on a narrow lot. It's up in Langley, up on Whidbey Island, 8 units. This is about 12 units an acre. And this is what it looks like here. It's the common theme, again, the open space area where people can congregate, design features, landscaping features that are built into these developments. So those are just examples, some of the examples you can find in the Puget Sound area, what cottage housing, different type of design for cottage housing and different lot sizes that went with those. So some of the policy issues that we're looking at with cottage housing, where would it be located within the city? Could it be allowed subject to design standards in the RS zones, in the neighborhood business overlay area, which is the downtown area, this area here? How would it be located within the city? What type of design standards would apply? With all this cottage housing type development, there are some specific design standards you're looking at for a certain quality and feel for the type of housing that you get in there, in terms of the looks, the architecture, the common areas, the more private areas that are required. Another policy issue is that, based upon all the other things that staff is working on right now, especially the comprehensive plan, which is a major item, we have to really target limited staff time towards these regulations. So if you do that, would the council be willing to set aside some funding to help bring in consultants to draw up some draft regulations? So there's some policy issues here. If the staff is working on cottage housing, there's other things that we cannot work on based on just time constraints. Other considerations, though, one which is a pretty powerful consideration when you look at it, is that underneath the revised Code of Washington, there's a couple sections dealing with GMA and how cities are allocated projection population growth within each county and within each city. Each city must provide zoning and densities to accommodate population growth that is being allocated to those cities. So far, we're doing pretty good in meeting our targets, but your cottage housing could be one of many methods, and it's, in my opinion, be a good method in helping to meet those allocation requirements, because it does provide added density, but it also provides quality housing, potentially quality housing. So those are some of the policy issues that we're looking at, and staff is just looking for direction and whether we should start diving into putting together some cottage housing regulations, some draft regulations, or how the council would like to handle that.
Questions, Council McGrath?
Yes.
My first question is, it says a property owner is inquiring about the construction of cottage housing. Does this property owner already have property in mind that he already owns that he wants to do this on?
That's correct.
Where is this property?
It's called Megan's Meadows. It's on Skinner Road. On Skinner Road.
North of First.
Okay. And then it's being built by Habitat for Humanity.
Yes.
Now, I know a little bit about Habitat for Humanity, and in your discussion, you said that a lot of it is going to be retired.
Well, the idea was to target it for veterans.
Right.
So that's what their idea would be. We don't have the full details of
well,
all
when you
of
say, retired veterans looking to downsize.
No, that's not it.
No.
Well, no, that's what he said.
No, he didn't.
No. What it is?
Well, that's what I heard.
Oh.
Downsizing.
Well, what I said in terms of cottage housing, a lot of times you have retired people looking for that type of development to downsize from bigger homes, where they have less in the way of maintenance costs for the houses and maintenance costs for landscaping and things like that.
But Habitat for Humanity is designed for people who have nothing to be able to buy something. It's not for. So what I'm hoping I'm not hearing is that this is being built for people that can afford to do something else. I'm hoping that this is for veterans who have nothing, that are looking to move into something
Yeah,
to
and
call home.
from my understanding with the Habitat for Humanity, is they're looking to have quality housing for lower income veterans.
Exactly.
They provide them a home.
Right, well, when I heard, and you said it just now again, that, downsizing and not wanting,
Yeah. Well, like
yards to
I said-
maintain.
Yeah, like I said, typically that's what you find. The Habitat for Humanity is, in this case, that's what their main target is, in terms for the veterans.
He was giving an example of a cottage house and who would typically move into it
Right.
versus
What
this situation. This is
What
kind of a
Habitat-
unique situation, I think, right?
Yeah. What it is that, Habitat for Humanity, they own the property, it's a platted subdivision with 9 lots. They can build on the lots as they are right now. They can come in, they would have to do a final plat alteration if they wanted to alter the lots. But they already have an approved setup for putting houses on the property. But what they were looking at is to provide something better than what is out there now. Such as you can see how the cottage housing is set up
Right.
and how they provide the interior common area for the folks, that they were looking at providing something like that for the veterans, something where they can congregate and talk and have more of a, kind of like a small community within the community, you might
Right.
say, is what they were envisioning.
Is there a possibility to sit down and meet with these people to ask and discuss their projected plans or ideas?
Well, no, I have, I was just talking to, I think it was Kelly, about setting up, they wanted to set up another time to talk, and I just talked to them today. I said, let's see what day was that, next week, I think, or sort of.
Well, is it possible for myself to be included in that meeting?
So the way this has started out, 8 months ago, they came into the they're ready to start looking at developing the plan. And so we met 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
About 3 weeks ago.
3 weeks ago, I have been putting feelers out looking to see if I get support because part of the conversation, I told them that building trades all have veterans programs that to work, different types of apprenticeship type programs, like the farm pipe fitters do, the sheet metal workers do,
Right.
all of it. And so we started talking about how we could have this community like built by vets for vets. Okay, so right now what we're trying to do is, one, we don't even know how we can attack funding, looking for funding until we can figure out what we're going to do with the property. We're either building the 9 houses, or we're going to look at cottage style. But even to seek funding or have some kind of budget, we need to figure out what's council's pleasure on moving forward as far as, so that we can start. Because we have to have like a number to start with, or a base idea to be able to go after finding funding. They have to have funding before they can even start.
So you're saying when they have to have funding, they need people to help to pay for the supplies for these houses? Is that what you're saying?
Supplies, there's all kinds of costs that are incurred. I mean, labor generally is volunteer, but not
Right.
always.
It's
There's a project manager on the project. They've done a few of these, never any of these on the lines where it's a veteran kind of thing. It was just kind of a conversation that started. When I'm back in New York next week, I'm hoping to have a meeting with America's Bravest as far as help with funding as well, because we were looking at possibly 3 tiers of houses, like ADA compliant and like different level of housing in this if we do a cottage style, or even if we did the 9. But to even do the cottage style, I had to come to council to find out if you're even willing to look at it. If not, then we go back to, okay, we have 9 houses on the lot.
Right. And one other factor that they can make on, likely that we'll have to amend our comprehensive plan, provide some policies within the plan to allow for cottage housing so that we can use those policies to use the regulations to implement. And that will take some time to do a comprehensive plan amendments.
Councilman Walker?
One of the things I'm concerned with is lot size. I like the idea for the veterans doing the cottage housing and Habitat for Humanity spearheading this, but I'm concerned about putting this in our ordinances, and maybe somebody that doesn't have such a honorable plan comes in and gets to make little houses and little tiny lots where their cars don't even hang over the end of their driveway.
Yeah. But one of the
Or their
things,
cars hang over the end of
well,
their
one of the things that
driveway.
we're looking at, when you look at cottage housing, you're looking at specific regulations tied to them, and specific design criteria that go with them. For example, the Greenwood Avenue cottages, which is shown here, it's in the middle, it's in a single-family neighborhood, smack in the middle of a single-family neighborhood. And this development equates to 12 and a half units per acre based on the size of the lot and the number of units. This works really well because the county at the time, because it was built when it was still in the county, not within the shoreline, it has some very specific design standards that went with that to ensure that it's small housing. Not small, like you're saying, small little lots where you can hardly put anything on and so forth. So there are design standards out there that you can go with. For example, I couldn't find it because it's just starting out. The city of Sammamish, they just adopted some cottage housing standards that actually were put into effect to deal, from what my understanding, with the Habitat for Humanity development in Sammamish. They put those together. That's the cottage housing development. It would be good to take a look to see how that worked out in Sammamish with Habitat for Humanity.
Is their ordinance tied to Habitat for Humanity?
No. Their ordinance, you're not tying an ordinance to a specific developer.
Right.
It's tied to, it's a citywide ordinance that you're putting together that apply to anybody that came in. Whether it's Habitat for Humanity or some other developer, it makes a difference. You have specific design standards that they would have to meet to qualify for a cottage housing development.
Councilmember Steiger.
Okay, the problem I see with this, number one, is there is no parking provisions. So, looking at this, say the Skinner Road one, so in turn, you're having all the parking out on Skinner Road, and so here you have a lot of very easy, accessible autos for immediately vandalism, because they can smash a window out, get in the car, have the other car sitting right there beside them, zoom, bang, and they're down the road. I mean, they have some of these very kind of not the same exact thing, but north of Seattle, years ago, they built these type of things. And all the overload on the streets and the parking situation, I mean, you gotta come home at 2 o'clock in the morning and sit and wait till you find a spot to park by 10 in the morning. I mean, and they've got to allow some place for a parking provision, even at least one car. You know, the other one can go to the street, but, I mean, they have to have some type of take one lot and be able to at least put 8, 10 cars in or something.
To answer Councilmember Steiger's question, all of these developments, they have requirements for off-street parking. It's just that I don't have a pointer to show you where it's at. This one here, like I mentioned earlier, is on...
Can you walk over to it, please? Sorry.
You can see.
Right here is an on-site parking lot for them.
Oh, okay.
And there's another...
Is that going to be fenced?
Yeah. There's a couple of garages there that would have indoor parking, and then there's, in this case, it has some outdoor parking spaces and then some visitor spaces. And that's the common theme through all of these like Chico Park, all the parking here, you can see where the parking garage is out towards the street. All the parking is oriented towards the street, and you can see where you have the garages where people have parking space to park in the garage, and then you have visitor spaces, and they're all by the street, so that everything that's green is on the inside. So all these, there are parking standards that are required for any of these developments. Same thing for the Erickson Avenue cottages. The parking, off-street parking there is on the right side of the stream by the property where that tree, some of it's underneath that tree, can't see it.
Then you have a garage or two.
And they have garages where they can park in, and the same thing for the Third Avenue cottages. All the parking comes in on the left side of the property, you can see where they're parked. They all have a minimum requirement to have one space per unit, and then there's also a requirement so many visitor spaces are required based on the number of units that are in that cottage housing. So there is off-street parking that's required.
Councilman Garber.
Okay, I have worked with Habitat for Humanity in the past, and I know rules change, but, 3 years ago, Habitat for Humanity did not build a garage because in their mind that was a waste of money that could be used to put towards livable space. Are you positive they're building garages?
Well, I don't know what the standards were that they went by. If the city adopts standards, they have to go by the standards, and if the standards are you have to have a garage with a space in there for a car, they have to abide by the standards like anybody else would. That's why I thought it'd probably be a good idea to take a look what City of Sammamish, they have regulations for cottage housing. Be interested to see how Habitat for Humanity, how their development looks based upon City of Sammamish regulations.
Can you get a copy of the Sammamish regulations for us?
Oh yeah, we can get those real easy.
Councilman Steiger, any other questions? No?
I like the idea of doing this cottage housing for groups like the veterans or Habitat for Humanity, but I am concerned about developers that want to squeeze in as many properties for profit
But
as possible.
yeah, and you always, in all of these, when you look at these developments here, like Third Avenue Cottage, yes, there's a profit margin that they have to meet, but in terms of the type of development that goes in, and if you have good regulations that apply to everybody, you're going to get a nice looking development. And part of the key is the design standards, how the open space is set up for parking and things like that. So if you have some strong, pretty tight design standards for these developments, you can get some pretty nice looking developments that, even though they're maybe profit driven, but they are good looking developments and an asset to the city. Plus they help provide another method to meet our population allocation requirements from the state.
Councilman Garber.
Question, after these are built and occupied, who maintains the properties?
Typically, as part of the homeowners association, the homeowners, it depends on, and it really kind of depends on the development and how the developer's setting up. A lot of times, they'll condominiumize sometimes they'll condominiumize the development where the people actually own the home, but the ground is common ownership. And then like for example, go back to Greenwood Avenue cottages. Here, the people own the houses, but the property underneath it is owned by the homeowners association, and they pay a fee for the maintenance. However, as part of this development, and it's hard to see, is that one of the requirements of this development is that around each one of the houses, they have a low fence about 3 feet tall that provides a separation from the common area that is called a private area for each individual house. So each house gets a feeling of individual space where they can plant some vegetables or flowers or whatever, so they feel like that's their territory outside of the common area.
And that property is maintained by the homeowner?
Oh, yeah. So they pay whatever fee, I don't know what it is, but it's a very nice looking development. Like I've been there a couple times looking at it on different field trips. And it's been well maintained, and everybody knows everybody there. So.
And the HOA would maintain like the roof on the garages, the parking areas, that kind of stuff as well, just like in a condo.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they're.
Okay, here's another one we've been looking at in the past, and I don't see it changing, is the homes are owned by the people who live there, the land is always owned by Habitat for Humanity, and the reason they do this is because they keep hold of the land. You buy the house, you live in the house, I believe you have to live in it for 7 years. After 7 years, your percentage of ownership goes up. If you sell the house, it has to be sold to someone who is in the same need. It can't be sold to anyone off the street. That is why they keep the land in the name of,
Habitat for Humanity.
thank you, Habitat for Humanity. You own the building, not the land. As far as the HOA, that's not something that, I'm really confused on this, because I can't see it changing after it's been this way for X amount of years, and the reason they do it is to keep the homes in the hands of the people who are in need of it, and don't have someone come in and take it over. I'm really confused on it. And then my second question, which relates to it but doesn't, is if we allow this to come in as for the veterans to, do something helpful, is this going to open it up for any developer to buy a small chunk of land and say, I'm going to put 12 mini houses on here, and I'm just going to send them individually for quick cash, because I can fit 12 houses on this land, where normally I'd only be able to fit one. Are we going to open ourselves up to that type of a thing?
Well, what you have is cottage housing regulations. I'm not going to recommend creating cottage housing regulations just for one developer, Habitat for Humanity. If we create regulations, it's going to apply citywide to anybody who wants to. If they can meet the requirements and the criteria for cottage housing, it'd be open to any developer. So, your scenario, if there's a piece of property, say it's a 34,000 square foot lot, and they can meet all the criteria for a cottage housing type development, regardless of who the developer is, they can come in and make the application, and they can build the development. That's the idea for that type of cottage housing. Now, one of the things that you can throw into the mix is that in the review process, what type of review processes you put together for cottage housing. It could be hearing examiner, recommendation to council, and council has final say in how it looks like. So that's where council can have some control over cottage housing if it is allowed. So, but any regulations would be citywide, and then it would be dependent on where the council would allow this type of development. Like I mentioned, one of the policies issues, are you going to allow it in RS zones subject to certain criteria, just the neighborhood business district, which is this area down here? Where could it be allowed in the city, and what type of restrictions would you put on it if it is allowed in the city?
But technically, we already have cottage housing, not even a block away from us.
Well, that's technically,
look at how that is.
yeah, I know what,
Look at the people that
I know what it
are
looks like, and just,
what to stop it from turning.
please.
I'm sorry.
what, in that respect, like say, it's design standards is what you're looking at. You can put together pretty tough design standards on how the fill and the quality is. As I've shown in all the pictures here, the quality of the development is pretty common throughout these cottages type developments in terms of the architecture, the feel of the development when you look at all these. And that's based on the fact that there are some tough design standards you have to meet. You wouldn't get that type of development down here off of Third as part of any of these type of standards. No.
Councilor Butler.
I know from other jurisdictions that have learned from exactly this sort of development, many of them actually don't allow you to spin off the ownership of the underlying land. They require it to stay one parcel, so that there is one party that is legally liable for code enforcement. If anything goes wrong anywhere on that property, there's one person you can go in and fine until they make it right. And you can't have one homeowner who decides to let their lot go to hell because the lot is still owned by whatever entity owns the whole thing. just like the habitat model, so that there's always one person you go to and say, this lot is not being properly maintained, it needs to. So you have to have those regulations in place, and then it doesn't matter who does the development, because whoever does the development has to follow the rules. And then, of course, the other half of that is, you have to have code enforcement that actually goes out and enforces those rules if something goes wrong.
And keeping in mind that we don't have a lot of lots that are gonna support this type of development. There's the one down here, the one that we're talking about. How many big lots do we have left? Quincy Yard, maybe.
Yeah, I'm already mapping them out here. Well, those tarp fence work?
No.
But, you know, when you look at them, typically, some of the lots that are here that you're looking at.
What's the smallest lot they have
Well, the smallest lot,
thus far?
the smallest lot in this respect was a 31,000 square foot lot in Langley.
.71 acres?
Yes,
We could almost get one on our spot then, huh?
yeah, and then the Greenwood Avenue cottages, that was on .79 acres, and that had 10 units on. So, you know, down, you're probably not going to get much lower than the 31,000. And the thing is that if the regulations you can put together, you can specify a minimum lot size that they have to be on. But
Did they say that the one or two that they're doing is the damage, they require the square footage of the house?
right. Mhm. Yeah, there's regulations that specify how big a house can be on the lot. So there's a lot of different ways to craft the regulations so that it fits within this if you wanted to go forward with it.
Councilor Garvey.
My other question is, you say there's not that many lots available. I will say that the lot that we live in, we would qualify. We could sell our home to a developer who could tear it down and put 8 houses.
No.
No?
Shy quarter acre.
Oh, we're shy, sorry, my bad. That's, my map was off.
But I took a very cursory look at the city's zoning map and look at some of the lots. There are still a number of lots that could be eligible for cottage housing, so the council determine that's something they want to pursue.
So our lot is a quarter acre, we put 3 cottage homes on it,
You just answered that.
and this is out.
There's specific requirements on the lot size that we can build. So we can say it can't be less than an acre or half an acre or whatever.
1,000 square feet. Okay. I'm just concerned that these are like these popping up and shady that.
If you had to guess how many buildable lots, let's say we made it an acre, just as a round number.
I couldn't give you a guess at this time.
More than 10, less than 1,000?
Well, yes.
Because I thought we had a presentation a while back that kind of outlined the buildable land we had. I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. Josh, what do you got? But
Not off the top of my head, I'm just
It's
looking
an
at.
acre in my backyard,
Yeah.
gigantic field, like an
Okay.
abandoned zone. Probably 14 little houses.
So, I guess the question is, does the council want to chew on this a little bit and think about it? And
How would,
Councilor Loeffler,
sorry, how would the, if we started putting cottage homes, how would that affect our water supply for the well? Or, I mean, can this type of population growth, can our wells support that?
well, like I said, the population allocation what's been allocated by King County to us right now, we can meet that up. We can be, in looking at our water supply at this point can meet the demand. In other words, we meet the concurrency requirements for the water supply. If through our comprehensive plan and what our build-out is in our current plan, if the water supply couldn't meet the demand of our current build-out in our comprehensive plan, then we would have to stop development. So at this point, based on our current comprehensive plan, and the densities in the comprehensive plan in terms of residential and then type of uses that are allowed in commercial industrial areas, our water supply can meet the demand build out at this point. Like I said, the cottage housing regulations, should we go forward with them, just provides another alternative to meet that population allocation requirement. So it would be, the water supply would be there for it, and certainly the sewer capability would be there for it.
Councilor Steiger.
Answer to your question, yes, we have adequate water right now to fulfill any of our projected population growth. That is why I've been so adamant, is that we do not supply water to any outside city limit. Number one is, when we felt we were going to be in critical shape, nobody would talk to us. And once we got water and whatever, now they come and they want to get it from us. No. And we can support this type of a housing thing.
What's the direction from council? Is this something we're interested in exploring, or do we want to just kill it right now? Councilor Steiger, or Councilor Butler?
I would be interested in having staff pursue it far enough to get us an estimate of how much staff time and expense would go into fleshing out full regulations and how narrowly they think they can tailor them to fit in the situation of the city.
Councilor Butler?
I agree, and I'd also like to see that, what you come up with from Samanage. I'd be very interested in entertaining this idea.
Other comments from council?
Well, let's do some, I would say, research without a lot of money spent.
So don't have the attorneys do it.
Yeah, Jim, you're out.
You're out. Councilor Butler?
Other things that I would suggest staff look at as far as, with concern over parking area, making sure that the allowable building size, unit size comports with the number of parking spaces that will be available. I know Habitat's been criticized in a couple of locations that they have a policy of one parking space per unit, but I know some of their units on Rainier Avenue are 5 and 6 bedrooms with one parking spot per unit. So, now, in the case of Rainier Avenue, it works out fine because it's right on light rail, it's right on, most of their people don't have cars anyway, so it works out.
Well, besides that, they buy a car stolen next day.
Well, yeah, on Rainier Avenue, yeah. So,
I work there.
but if you tried that same model in Pacific, it's not terribly walkable for most people, even if you happen to be right on the bus line.
And one of the things you can look at is you can have the park based upon the number of bedrooms. That's a very simple requirement.
I might be inclined to go by number of bedrooms and total square footage, because once a property is occupied, people sleep in rooms that are not officially designated bedrooms.
Other questions? Councilor O'Rourke?
DRSA's input on, I would like to see more from their input
Oh, yeah.
on additions of this size.
Right, and actually, their input would be necessary just on the fact that when you're looking at the configurations on it and how you get emergency services into this area. So any type of development such as this, the local fire district or the fire department definitely has a lot of input on how they can provide emergency services to some development.
I'm curious, we have each fire station has a surrounding number, so that's where I'm looking at too, is the number. If we all of a sudden have 12 houses, do we have enough fire department? Well, yeah, I know there's something better, but.
I know some jurisdictions require stand sites within the development so that you don't have to be able to get a truck up there, you can just run in the hose. The walkways are all sized wide enough that they can run the gurney down, so they don't have to get the ambulance right to the door. They do take those things into consideration.
In some of these types of developments, if they can't get in there, usually you have a, kind of a standard, you have to be within 150 feet of a hydrant. And if they can't meet that, then a lot of times they'll require that each individual home is sprinkled, so they meet the fire code requirements.
Which is a good idea for insurance costs anyway.
And maybe part of the fire code now.
For rentals, yeah.
No,
Well,
it's
these
still
wouldn't
not
be a
passing.
rental.
It's still not passing, they're still arguing at, public hearings over townhomes. I sit on the building code council, they're talking about it.
I was gonna say the same thing that I think Josh said, that in a little development like that, they have these all over Fort Lewis, where they're walk-in only, you park, and they have fire plugs inside the, I don't know how them compound of houses and whatnot, that, and then the walkways are extra wide to get gurneys or machinery or whatever necessities
Right.
through, so it would have to be approved through the fire department.
Oh, yes.
Councilor Stichels.
Well, any development or anything else is always gonna be approved by the fire department anyway. And, another thing is, the more you build, the more revenue that's paid to the fire department, the more money they can hire to put people to protect that real housing. So, we're talking about issues right now, all we're doing is wasting a lot of time.
Okay.
Because they're issues that automatically will fall into place.
Any other questions?
Do you have the direction you need?
I certainly do.
And then some.